Hey everybody, Lex DeVille here, back for another lesson of advanced Upwork proposal writing. This one's going to be talking about vague and specific language patterns. When are you going to use these? What are they used for? And how do you know which one to use? So vague language, you're telling a story, and that story doesn't have any details. One day, I was walking along a road, and I was headed in a direction, and where I was going was somewhere I had never been before. I saw an animal in the sky, and it was flying overhead, and it swooped down, and just as it swooped down, another animal captured it in its beak and flew away. There's a lot of vagueness in that story. That story, you could call it a story. It kind of sucked, but a lot of vagueness in there, okay? I was being vague. I was talking about animals. I didn't tell you what kind of animal. I said there was an animal in the sky and another animal came down and ate it. I talked about being on a path and going a direction. I didn't say which direction. I didn't say what kind of path or what the path was made out of. I didn't tell you who I am or whether it was day or night or whether I was indoors or outdoors. I didn't tell you anything. I just said a bunch of vague stuff. It was very vague. But guarantee you it created some kind of picture in your mind, and you thought about the words I was saying for just a second, and you formed a concept of this, you formed a thought, you imagined as best you could the story that I was telling you. Now, on the other hand, you've got specific language. So I was walking down 5th Street last night at 7 p.m. when a man with a name tag that said Robbie jumped out, wielding a very sharp blade. He screamed at me, "Give me all your money." And so I pulled out my wallet from my back left pocket, threw it at him as hard as I could, and took off running down 7th Street till my breath ran out and I ended up at my grandmother's house. My grandmother Cindy's house. I don't have a grandmother Cindy, but my mom's name is Cindy, so whatever, it is what it is. And she's a grandma now. Anyway, that's specific, right? We talked about the names of the streets. We talked about the name of the criminal. We talked about what kind of weapon he was wielding. We talked about the actions I was taking. I was running. I ran down 7th Street. Where did I run to? I ran to my grandmother's house, my grandmother Cindy's house, and I stopped only because I ran out of breath. You have a lot of details in there, okay? It's different from the other one. Now, we don't want to go too deep into storytelling and story writing. That's not for this section of the Upwork proposal. But if you were doing this with an Upwork proposal, which kind of language should you use? Well, it kind of depends on a couple of things. First of all, it depends on what does the client need to read from you. And this goes back to the information gathering. So when you're reading through the client's job post, you want to pay attention to whether or not they are using vague or specific language. Whenever they're using, let's say they're using vague language. They say, "I need a copywriter for some copywriting work, and I need him to start sometime this week and to do a good job." Well, there's a lot of stuff you don't know. So there's a lot of room for you to add value when they speak in vague language. But you also need to consider that you might need to respond to them in vague language. So part of your response may need to be a little bit vague, and part of your response may need to be a little bit specific so you can add value. If they say they need a copywriter for some copywriting, for you to know if this is a good gig or not, and for you to be able to help them, you might say, "I see you need a copywriter for some copywriting," or you need a copywriter for some copywriting. Can you tell me what specific kind of copywriting do you need? Do you need email copy? Do you need web page copy? And then you could list out a couple of specific things, and they're going to say, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, I do need some web copy, and I also have some email copy, and we also have some Facebook ads." So by doing that, you've helped them gain a little bit of clarity where before they were vague. They just had a vague concept in their mind. You've moved them with specific language to being more clear. Now, some people are going to be really, really caught up in details. These people are going to use specific language. They might write a long proposal and it might have a lot of little fine details in it, and they're getting caught up in these details. They can't see the forest for the trees. So for those people, you might use vague language. They're using specific language. You might use vague language to say, "Hey, yeah, I see everything that you're doing and I can help you with that. I've got this." That's a pretty big high level concept. If you say, "I can help you with that," or "I've got this," and you don't address everything, sometimes that can be what they need to hear. You just have to kind of play it by ear. And I want to put this in there just so it's in front of your attention. I'll kind of go into it more in a downloadable attachment, resource, whatever you want to call it. But I want it to be at your attention because I know before I did say if they write a long job post, you want to write a long job post also. And that may be the same here. If they write a short job post, you want to keep it short still. But if it's vague, you might need to put a little bit of specificity in there. And if it's specific, you might need to put a little bit of vagueness in there to help that client move from their place of stuckness to their place of growth or expansion or forward momentum in their business. That's going to help them. It's going to make you look a lot more valuable in their eyes. So just play it by ear. If they're being super vague, you can use a little bit of vague language in there, but also use some specific questions or just get a little bit specific with them so that they will give you the details you need to make this happen. And if they're super specific, be specific back, but then throw some vagueness in there. So you need this and this and this and this specifically. That's something I can help you with because I've helped a lot of people with that. That's vague, and I'm saying that I've done that for them, and they're just feeling confident in me now because I've made it clear that I'm the person who can help them. That's the difference between vague and specific language patterns when you might use them. You would also use, if you're telling a story, you might use some vague language like I did in the beginning of this lesson. So if that's something that, if you're doing like freelance writing, that might be valuable for you. If you're a freaking web designer, you're a app developer, something logical and computerized, you're probably not going to be telling as many stories, but you might. I don't know, you might need to be more analytical to show your value to the client. So that might require more specificity from you. So just a few thoughts off the top of my head. But do what makes sense in the moment. Test out some different things. Test out different language patterns and just see what works. If you start getting good results with something, pay attention to that and use it more. That's vague and specific language app. If you have any questions, let me know down below. Hit me up in the Discord chat, whatever. I'm Lex DeVille, and I'll see you in the next lesson.